So, John, research. What is research to you?
Research to me, it is a great distract. No, um, I mean, there's quite a lot of. To me, there's a lot of forms of research. There is that surface level. I think we called it research, as in search, where you're just searching. That is like the not even laziest form of search, but that is like the lowest level of research. Barely could be called research, but I suppose
Yeah.
it is a form of it. And then you're kind of it is collecting and finding and exploring a topic that you are interested in at various levels of depth. That's
I,
probably the best way I could describe it.
I was going to say the same thing. The depth of research is certainly where I get mildly irritated with some people when they say, I did some research. I'm like,
You did
so
a Google. I looked at a
yeah,
blog post.
yes, searching on Google or asking ChatGPT or Bing something is drastically different from going in and reading not just the abstract of articles and the summaries of blog posts,
But
but
diving in there, diving
yeah,
in there.
the actual conversations. Because I've been researching lots of things. But when I research, it's not like I read a couple of articles. It's no, I actually read the entirety of the articles, looked at the discussion points, came up with questions, and then tried to explore those points in the same sorts of depths, which means research takes far longer than a couple of hours. But you could quite easily say, oh yeah, I did research on the topic as well by just doing a couple searches on the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
as someone that does a lot of research, and for people that are inside the note-taking world, when people say, "Oh yeah, I've done some research on this," or "I've been researching this topic," um, I feel like it can be a distraction. This idea of I'm researching all these topics, I think it can be a distraction from the actual projects and work that they want to slash should do get done.
Yes, absolutely. And I have fallen prey to the research, like rabbit hole, research rabbit hole. I like that. Research rabbit hole. That that is often where I go.
Yeah, it's
So what do we do about it, Danny?
why do we need a solution for it, John?
Because it's a bad thing. We shouldn't get distracted.
But we always get distracted. It's human
But it's
nature.
my brain that made me get distracted.
Your brain made you distracted. Did it now, John?
Yeah.
Did it now, John?
Yeah, yeah. Because that's how it works, isn't it? The brain controls everything, and so I have no control or anything.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. I forgot about that. The environment has like no causal
No.
relationship. It's just there just happens to be something on the screen that just happens to be related to the research that I happen to be interested in, and that just happens to cause my brain to be distracted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to deny that the environment exists. It's just not that big of a deal. And our brains are the most important thing, said by our brains.
Yeah, but is it said by our brains? Because our
Oh,
mouths are
no,
saying
it
it.
is. It is, you see, it is.
Right, so everything just goes back to the brain. Everything that we have ever
Yeah,
done, every
yeah.
behavior,
We
every
don't have personality. We don't have the ability to think for ourselves because our brain is doing it. This chunk of meat does it for us.
and neurons. Don't forget, it's got to be
Oh yeah,
neurons
and your neurons.
and
Yeah.
synaptic klepses and chemical neuro stuff that goes between brain things. Yeah, yeah.
People who aren't watching and are listening and can't pick up on sarcasm, all of that was a bit just in case you think we've been replaced by
I don't
brain.
I don't think I don't think AI would done a very good job of being sarcastic about that. I don't think AI could have replaced us in that instance.
No,
Because I have no idea how AI would make it sound sarcastic.
that would be really funny to find out.
Yeah. We'll have to test
Anyway,
that. AI, can you be sarcastic? Of course I can. Sarcasm. Uh, so when it comes to when it actually comes to this research distraction thing, for me, when I'm researching, there is always this ongoing question because we perceive and act coupled. We do it together. We're constantly making those decisions. So there is constantly a decision of, well, the questions of, is this too much? Is this enough? Is this not enough? When should I stop? And answering those questions at the end of the day is how you stop doing distraction research. But distraction research is a noun. You categorizing something as a distraction, but everyone is going to categorize it differently. So when we look at behaviors and the process of researching, when do you evolve the researching process into more of a writing process? That obviously, again, is going to depend on how you would classify what writing and research is, and putting aside the very cloudy barriers at the moment, what I personally do is stay focused on the point of the project. And people may go, yeah, but you shouldn't have a project for research, or this thing I'm looking into, it's not a project, it's just an interest of mine. Okay, if it's an interest of yours, then it's a project, because there's going to
yeah,
be an end date on a part of that project.
and I think
And
that's kind of the thing that people always struggled with like that project description because it's so annoying.
I imagine people will come back and say, yeah, but there's no end date on personal development, which I agree.
Mm,
But events, there are multiple overlapping events that fill out time. And the project is the arbitrary end of a specific event.
yeah.
So I could say this project is ending today, because
Mm,
this podcast episode about distraction research is ending today.
yeah.
so, so if I wanted to do research for this project, for this episode, it will end today. Can it then continue? Yes. Will it continue? Inevitably, because I can't stop thinking about something that I've done in the past deliberately. Right. In 3 years' time, I may think about this episode for no apparent reason, and now the event has emerged more. It never stopped, like finished the event, but the project event did finish, because
Yeah. It was done, it was uploaded, it was sorted, it was finished.
exactly. So when people discuss research, I feel like their immediate, not necessarily goal, but their immediate target is to say, or thing, I don't know what is the most appropriate word yet. The thing that they say is it's ongoing, and the events are ongoing. Yes, the learning is ongoing. Yes, the practice is ongoing. Yes, that's your philosophy of practice. But when you decide to sit down and do research, that's a session. That's a practice session. That is an event. That is something that has an end date or an end time. And that is, for me, what we mean, or what I mean when I talk about distraction research. It is events that we have decided to engage in, sessions that we've decided to start, that we want to stop. For whatever reason, we want to stop doing those sessions.
Yeah.
And when you reduce the research to that, how do I stop doing a session? How do you stop doing a practice? Well, that's the same answer as any other practice, any other behavior that you're doing. There is no difference. Does that make sense, or am I talking in too much theoretical, too much theory?
Sense? Yeah, it makes sense. It does definitely. It sounds like it's like having a point to the research is really useful, like the project being the point, the actual action, the outcome you wish to have. It's going towards something versus just researching for the sake of researching. And it also releases quite a lot of like, oh, I spent 4 hours researching this. Okay, cool. But did you want to do that? Okay, yes. Okay, fine. That's fine. Are you putting it somewhere? Yes. Okay, cool. But can you research for the sake of researching and just how one of the questions that I have, especially is when I go into stuff, is how do you decide? Yes, theoretically, I understand that you choose when, but how do you decide on that? I think I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway because maybe other people are thinking that. Go.
What do you think the answer is? Because obviously you're one of
Your
your
pop.
yeah.
That's exactly what I think it's going to be. I'm just like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because I was thinking, like,
okay,
inside your pop, there's curiosity is your word, and
yeah,
curiosity obviously follows research.
yeah. Ah, all right, cool. I understand. Answer my own question.
You've answered your own question. What was your question going to be?
I don't think there was a question. It was more of a how do you do that pop? Okay, cool. If I'm saying that it's pop, curiosity's in my pop. Okay, so right now there's no. If I'm just being curious, then I am working towards my pop as such. Working towards it, not quite like that.
Following.
Following my pop. So in other words, I'm following curiosity, which is exactly what I want to do. Okay, cool. Carry on.
And then the, I guess, next step, it's not like step or instructions, but the next thing that I would engage in is, okay, I'm following my pop, I'm following curiosity. Where does that lead?
Mm,
It has to lead somewhere because time is constant. Time is constantly changing, obviously. So it's got to lead somewhere. Is it going to lead into more questions? Is it going to lead into a change of behavior, ideally? What sort of change of behavior are you expecting? Are you wanting? Do you want change of behavior? If you don't want to change your behavior, then why are you curious?
mm,
And that's a question that I challenged myself with years ago because I was very similar. I was like, I'm curious, I want to learn more. That's great, but why? Why do I want to learn more? I'm learning more because it's fun. Great. Don't get me wrong, it's great to learn because it's fun, but why? We already know through all the research that if you don't use it, you lose it. So
mm.
if you're learning loads of stuff and you're not using it, then you'll lose it. And we know that if you learn stuff in school that you don't care about, you'll forget it because you don't care about it.
Yeah.
So if people are curious, which most people are, and they do research in whatever depth they prefer, what's the point? What do they do with it? Where do they go with it? What's the next step, as it were?
Mm,
And that's a question that I challenge myself with constantly because obviously I'm always learning. For me, I follow my pop, and in my pop, I have answers to those. I guess, do you want to explain what a pop is for those uninitiated?
so pop is a philosophy of practice, um, which is basically the philosophy that you live by is the best or wish to live by. It kind of breaks down your values, the things that you do, and how you live. Yeah,
Interesting.
beautifully described. I did really
Well,
well with that.
that's the sort of thing though that I would like question other people about. Is like when they're like, oh yeah, I do this and I do that, and I hold this value and I hold this competency and I do this in practice. If you ask them to explain it to you, no, this isn't the Feynman technique. Um, if you ask them to explain it to you, and then you probe with questions, the level of understanding, their depth of understanding will increase, and their ability to explain whatever the concept is, the topic is, obviously will then be challenged. Will it improve? It depends on the practice afterwards. So when I look at my philosophy of practice document, because yes, I have a document inside of Obsidian that discusses this sort of thing. We've done a whole episode about this, which you can find on the podcast. But briefly put, it's a list of words, lexicon, that explains your meaning behind, because meanings are in people, not words. That's what I hold, and that's what I think a lot of people inside of the language and linguistic research also hold. Meanings are in people because there are so many different ways you can interpret words. Then there is the philosophy, which is all of philosophy. What are your competencies? What are your components of health? What are your statements? What are your goals? What are your outcomes? All those sorts of things, and values. And then there is the practice, or the design. How do you behave? What is the behavior? So you have the philosophy, the why, and the behavior, the what. And when we're looking at research, it's the practice, ideally, that we would use to answer those questions. So when we say, I'm following my curiosity, great. You're now following your philosophy of your pop. You're following your values of curiosity. But what does that look like in practice? What does curiosity look like in practice? Oh, well, I just Google stuff. Does that uphold any other values? So do you want depth of understanding, dense understanding, impartial views on topics? If you do, well, your practice has now got to replicate those other values. I'm curious, but I'm curious with depth, with impartiality, with integrity. So you can't just do a 5-minute Google and then say you're an expert on something. You have developed your expertise in it, but have you developed your expertise enough to get to a point where you are comfortable? A point. Now you've got an end goal. A point at which you're comfortable explaining the concept to someone else. If you're comfortable explaining that concept to a 4-year-old, you have a level of expertise that reaches your point of curiosity. I understand this well enough, great. But if that point is maybe explaining it to a high school student or a secondary school student that's learning about the topic, well, now your level of expertise and the depth of understanding is increased. Therefore, curiosity, the research, needs to go further. And now the point has changed. And that point will constantly change, which is where you get the constant learning. So the project is the end point, which could be explaining it to a person, explaining it to a friend, making a video about it. How I do that in practice is inside the Discord. I use the community as my point gauge. So I was very happy with the article that I wrote about academic publishing, because I felt it expanded all the areas of academic publishing that I wanted to explore in that article. Could I have gone deeper? Yes. Did I want to go deeper? No, because I wanted this to be readable, sort of, to non-academics. I then shared it, and Ilori, someone in the Discord, came back to me and said, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Some of the points, well, all of the points were valid. Some of the points were going too far for my preference in that article. They did then say, hey, maybe you should make it into 2 articles, which I was thinking about splitting up the article, but I've actually decided against it. And the reason I've decided against it is because I don't want people going backwards and forwards between 2 articles to understand the arguments. That's my point. So I'm giving up specificity for simplification, for convenience in the communication of the science, really, which has to happen to some extent. To what extent is another question that I would need to answer.
I was just thinking that.
To what extent am I happy with the simplification? And if it's oversimplification, I would probably not be happy with it, which is why I don't have a 500-word article about it, which is why it's like 1,500 words instead.
So, oversimplification. There, yes.
Say word, then silence.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm being deliberate with my words. I'm really intrigued because if we think of oversimplification as it pertains to the ecological approach, it's not going to be a static, this is now oversimplified. It's more of a dynamical thing, which I just realized because I was just like, what's too much? What's the cutoff point? And I'm like, wait, no, 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 no. That was my reaction. I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. Because there is no like, it must be over X number of words. It must have these kind of concepts in, otherwise it's oversimplified. Because that's different. Because if I was to write an article about some of these topics and then give it to you, it would be oversimplified. However, depending on the order, well, it could be oversimplified.
That's better.
Yeah, it could be oversimplified. However, if I give it to someone else who is not as experienced, it could be undersimplified.
Overcomplicated,
Overcomplicated. Yeah. And so that's quite an interesting, I suppose, being clear on your audience, which is obvious, but it's nice to talk it out. Like being clear on who it's for is super darn important.
So I'm glad you went through that, because that to me was you asking a traditional question.
Yes.
What is oversimplification? When is it oversimplified? Then you realized, wait a minute, ecological approach, that question is ill-posed. Those questions are ill-posed because oversimplified is a noun associated to a point. But things are dynamic. So reframing the question, which is what Gibson argues we should do, reframe the question to an ecological perspective. Okay, everything is oversimplified. Everything is overcomplicated. So an article is oversimplified and overcomplicated at the same time.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
So when I say, again, this is my meaning behind the word, when I say this article is oversimplified, I have an interpretation of who the article is directed at, and I have experience and expertise around the topic that I'm using to express my thoughts on whether it matches the target audience. But if the creator had a different target audience and has different experience, the latter probably being very likely, then they may feel it's aptly simplified.
Yeah.
Which is where we get the frustrating conversations online when people argue this is oversimplification, this is misinformation, this is X, Y, Z. Because inside plagiarism, one person could say that's plagiarized. The other person could say they're just rewording it. Is plagiarism bad? What plagiarism is bad? Because if it's education and let's put some arbitrary numbers into this, a video gets 100 views, and then another person uses the exact same audio, the exact same words, but changes the visuals on it. Say they put some AI visuals on it. Now the video gets 100,000 views. Is that plagiarism? A lot of people will say yes, because they've used the same words, they've used the same content. All they've done is added AI images, which they don't technically have. Yeah, I would agree. That's plagiarism. But is it bad? Because the topic, the concept, now has more eyes and more views. What makes the plagiarism bad? If it's education, well, now more people have access to the education. So what makes it bad? Oh, because you're not crediting the original creator. Who's the original creator?
Oh dear, no.
Who's the original creator? Is it the person that made that piece of content because it's that is the unique content that they created? Well, what makes it unique? Well, they said the words. Well, if someone else has said the words, then it's not the original creator anymore. So where do you draw those lines of what is original? everyone is going to have a different line that they draw. So what is plagiarism? Plagiarism is taking someone else's idea. Well, what if someone else had the idea at the same time? You then need to prove that that person had it first, had the idea first. And it gets very complicated very, very quickly, which to me brings up arguments about what is the point of plagiarism here? When you look at the academic arguments, it's, oh, that person's essentially ego, status, stature inside of research. If it's one article, then, okay, there's plagiarized articles. I would argue, so what? I know a lot of academics are going to be like, oh, but plagiarism's bad, you shouldn't be doing it. So what? If you have 100 people posting stuff about your article, if your goal is to share science with the world, why is that a bad thing? They're giving credit to other people. Okay, so what? The bad thing for me, I think that they're arguing, is, well, if people ask the authors of those things, those articles, questions about it, they will give different answers. But now the issue isn't the plagiarism itself. The issue is what happens after the plagiarism. But that assumes you have the accurate answers to the questions that the audience are asking, which might actually, the people that have plagiarized your work, they might actually have better answers and more effective answers for that audience. When we look at YouTube, for example, I'm going to use YouTube because it's the most popular one and probably most used online. If a video is uploaded by another creator, yes, YouTube do the plagiarism stuff, fair use, etc., etc. But if someone has questions about the information, there's a fairly popular example inside of the geography YouTube sphere. One of Faultline's videos was literally word for word copied, but they had different someone else had different graphics. YouTube comments of that video, the creator of the video couldn't answer the questions because they didn't have the expertise, because they hadn't made the video. But the questions they did answer were correct because they'd got the facts. They had the information. They learned from copying the original creator. So they were helping the original creator. But that's plagiarism. Plagiarism's bad. So it's not all bad. The use of plagiarism can be beneficial in education because it helps with the research process. I then asked some other questions. Falsification, fabrication. Well, those two are different. That's making up information. And that's where I personally draw the line. Is plagiarism bad? I certainly think it has negative consequences. Is it bad? Depends on the perspective you take. Right? So when I look at research, sort of stepping back for a minute, when I look at research and when I stop, when I start, when I choose to keep going, where I choose to be oversimplified or overcomplicated, it completely depends on the relationship I have with the environment. Organism-environment relationship. What does that relationship look like? Because each person is going to have a different relationship to the information, i.e. the environment, which means they're going to label it different, i.e. add a word to it, have a meaning behind that word that is different, which leads to conversations. And there's no end to those conversations, which is what's exciting about research, but also frustrating about research. Because there are arbitrary deadlines that people put into things. Where I would like to see research go is, instead of it being, I've done the research, now on to the next project, this is where I got to, let's move this conversation forwards. Because that's what research is. It's constant conversation, sharing backwards and forwards between scientists. And no, you don't have to be in a lab coat doing research in a university lab, getting paid loads of money, or at the university getting paid loads of money to do research. No, you can be a scientist without any of the resources. A scientist uses hypothesis, use testing, for hypothesis. So everyone is a form of scientist. Everyone is a form of researcher. And everyone can contribute to conversations. And it's when people don't contribute to conversations, it's when people shut down conversations or make assumptions in conversations and end conversations that science and research is being prevented, is being stopped, or being hidden. That goes against my values. That goes against my pop. That goes against research for me. And there are plenty of examples of those sorts of things happening online. And I would argue that contrarians do a better job of researching than the answer crew. Sorry?
Yes, men.
Yeah, exactly. The advice people, this is what you do, tip, trick, hack thing. Yes, those people engage in research, but when they just give blanket instruction advice, unless they leave it open for conversation, I feel like they're actually stopping curiosity. They're stopping research. They're adding barriers which don't need to be there. Now that I've done my episodal rant, your thoughts? You agree? You disagree? You want to add to? Take away?
Divide, subtract, multiply.
Emphasize. Yes.
Emphasize. Yes. No, I...
Bold.
Yeah, italic. Strike through. No.
Yeah, you could do, but like, fuck all that. You're talking shit, I'm a strike through all of that.
No, yes.
But why yes?
Oh, you're challenging me in my own thing, you contrarian.
Yeah, I am. And I'm embracing that. I don't see it as a bad word.
I know, it's so fascinating. So something that I've been, when other elements of my environment,
when life isn't negatively impacting your relationship,
that I like. Or AKA when shit doesn't suck.
Yep.
One of the things that I've been thinking about is like the neurodiverse, I use that word because it's what they use, relationship to being organized and productivity and like in the business world and coaching and all of this stuff that happens in the environment that I spend a lot of time in. There is so much that I'm just like, I will be contrarian. And I think what I've been doing, I realized as you were talking, what I've been doing over the last, like, I think 6 months, I don't know, is slowly gaining expertise to be able to communicate and talk about that.
Yes.
Because I didn't have that expertise. I knew what I wanted to say, but I wanted to ensure that I had the expertise to say what I wish to say. And not speak.
Answer the questions that you're inevitably going to get.
And answer the questions that I'm inevitably going to get. Yeah, that was the whole thing. And regarding like plagiarism, it reminds us of one of our conversations we had quite early on, because we both share kind of similar ideas and we both kind of come at it in a similar way. So often we're just like, oh yeah, I'm kind of going to turn this into a thing. Are you okay with that? Because we kind of share these ideas. Is it okay to turn it into a product? And we've both been saying the same thing and feeling the same thing. And it would be very easy to go, oh, he's plagiarizing him or he's plagiarizing the other. And there's so much of that conversation, especially in the bits like you're plagiarizing the same information, you're just sharing the same information. In the business world, it's just nuts. Everyone's sharing the same stuff over and over again. And they're all assuming the exact same thing. And it's interesting because one of the things that I went through is I was like, oh, I want to share more about this kind of idea. And it's like, oh, but if I start sharing it, everyone's going to talk about it, but they don't know quite what they're talking about yet. And so I'm like, is that okay? there'll be, and that I think is my lack of expertise.
Continue. I want you to continue that point.
What point? Sorry.
Is that okay? I want you to go further.
If they're learning, but if it's misinformation, then no. I think I agree. It's kind of similar to you.
How will they know it's misinformation?
They wouldn't.
So what would they do? To obviously try and follow. What I would do is try and follow through some of their potential processes. Like as they're processing information. When I say processing, I mean working through, not like mentally calculating shit. Yeah. When they're trying to work through and understand what it is that you're saying, obviously that's learning.
Yeah. And obviously sharing that is helping them to develop their learning anyway.
It gives them the opportunity to.
Yeah, gives them opportunity to keep continuing that, which is the thing I suppose I find that more interesting. And I'm less like, this sucks. Someone's stolen my idea. But at the end of the day, if they want to learn more, they'll have to come back.
What if they don't know?
If they don't, then they'll have to do their own research. And if they don't, that would kind of suck.
I feel this is a feeling. I feel you're holding on to intellectual property there. You're saying you are the one with the expertise.
Yeah.
You're sharing the expertise, and you want them to go back to you.
Yes, probably. Which I don't like. But yeah.
Precisely. And that is where philosophy and practice, I think, can conflict when we look at education.
Yeah.
Because to me, there is no reason for you 6 months ago to have held back on what it is that you're learning. Because you're just exposing ideas. So the fear and the worry is for some reason. That could have been, I don't know enough. So when people ask me questions.
Yeah, that's definitely what it was for quite a while. But now it's shifted.
But even back then, if you don't know enough, why can't you still ask the question? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? They go, I don't like that idea. So what? Or they go, okay, that's interesting. What about this? I don't know. Let's go learn. And now you've got someone else to work with you. The worst thing that happens is someone goes, no, that's a stupid idea. Okay, fine. Or you get someone to help with it. Or you get questions that you're like, oh, that's a good question. Didn't think of that. I need to go find an answer to that. Because you are at no different point now than 6 months ago when it comes to expressing the information. Because you could still get questions. You're like, I don't know. And you're still going to get people.
I don't think that will ever change.
No, it can't. It can't change. Because learning is constant.
Yeah, that was annoying. Can't I just be an expert in everything? Can't I just know everything and be able to answer everything?
No. See, your mental capacity doesn't give you.
I see. It's my brain again. It's my brain.
Exactly.
My brain.
It has to be.
Ugh. My brain.
But you see where I'm getting at?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. I think the sharing of ideas has always been, I suppose, a struggle point for me.
It is for most people.
Yeah. It's very much been like trying to put out unfinished work as such, assuming that it can ever be finished. I recognize that very quickly, which it can't. And I think
another ill-posed question.
Yeah. And I think in the business world, it's off content in the business world is seen as this is a piece of content that is finished. It is done. It is out there. And then that's it. Versus it being a constant flow of ideas. And obviously, you can never update your ideas as you figure more things out. Obviously, it's all just static.
That it's just like that there is why events and overlapping events is integral to understanding that yes, you can finish something, but just because you finished it in one event doesn't mean it's finished in another event, because someone may see that and have questions about that. And now the event has started, a different event that's related to the old event has started, which is where you get overlapping events, which is why things are just continuous, which is where there's these conversations that somewhat end with content online don't really end.
No.
What's ended is the creator's interest in answering those questions. And when this is something that I think is prevalent in business and marketing, partly because of the system that it's in, but when people rebrand or reframe or come up with new ideas or frameworks or models or whatever word you want to put there, they're not actually doing anything new.
No.
They're continuing a conversation that's been happening for years. But because they've reframed it, they've added complexity to it. They've added complexity to an already simple process, which is where I get frustrated. Because I'm like, you're adding this jargon to try and simplify something that is already inherently simple. There is complexity with the simple process, but instead of going into the complexity, you come up with your own complexity. How does that help? The work that people do inside of the courses, the videos, and everything else, the work they're doing is them becoming attuned to the constraints of the process, not of your model. Your model is the heuristics. It's the complexity you've added to something to help them understand it through the constraints you've added in the model. When someone then goes beyond that model, i.e., they go outside of the constraints, they will then find the original point. And when you take this from outside of theory and put it into practice, what that is, that's the CLA inside of a coaching session. CLA, constraints-led approach to learning, to coaching, to developing. If you look at football, you have, okay, we're going to constrain the environment. You're going to say we're going to have a small pitch, we're going to have less people, and you've got 2 goals. You've got 2 small goals instead of a big goal with a goalkeeper. Okay, they're the constraints. When you realize that, oh, wait, I can kick the ball in the goal from anywhere on the pitch, I don't have to be in front of the goal, you start scoring from everywhere. Right, well, now we're going to have to put a person in goal, so you can't just score from anywhere. Change the constraint. And eventually you'll get to a point where, well, we've got 11 people on this really small pitch, in this really small goal. It's not possible, it's not doable anymore, so we need to make the pitch bigger. But the courses don't make the pitch bigger. The making the pitch bigger is people going, okay, this course is not enough for me anymore. I need to move outside of these constraints into, this is where people say, oh, we're going to the real world. No, you're just moving outside of this constrained learning environment to the bigger picture. But that transition is made harder when the complexity of the learning environment blurs the original thing, because you're now conditioned to that task. Being really, really narrow here into football, pass against a wall. You get really good at passing against a wall. That's a constrained learning environment that helps you develop specific skills. But now the skill is extremely difficult to transfer into football because people aren't walls. Like, people move. And when you look at the courses, the course is that constrained environment. They develop skills in that environment. They transfer those skills into other environments, i.e. their workplace, and they struggle. So how do we bridge that gap? Make the practice representative. Again, a concept from the constraints-led approach to coaching. Make the practice representative of what it is that you're going to be doing. Is inside of note-taking, your practice going to be, I'm going to create a map of content. I'm going to create 100 atomic notes that relate to the concepts inside of my maps of content, and then research this for hours using progressive summarization to get a project done. Are you developing skills? Yes.
I don't have time for that shit.
But are they transferable skills into the projects you want to get done?
No.
For me, definitely not. And I would argue for the majority of people, probably not. Are they skills you could use and manipulate? Yes. But what part of those skills? The constraints. Map of content. What are the constraints that build up that skill? Organization. Distillation. Can you do that without making a map of content? Yeah.
Yes.
A query, a bullet point list, an outline, a table of contents. Did they exist before the map of concept existed? Yes. So what does the map of content do? For me, it adds complexity. It adds another term with various meanings to things that already exist.
Index.
Yeah. That's my argument against terms like map of content, atomic note.
You contrarian, you.
I know. And I know people will argue, oh, but they're helpful and they're beneficial. Yeah, they can be. But that's the same as rote practice. It can be helpful, but it doesn't mean it's effective for most people. And what's mildly ironic is a lot of the people that are inside the PKM space look at flashcards, space repetition, active recall, retrieval practice. And when you ask them, oh, so could you do this by just working on the project? They go, yes. You go,
so why are you doing it?
So exactly. I'm like, I'm confused.
I think this is the thing, is that adding those multiple layers of complexity, one of the things that I've always been told I should do is create my own kind of system to just explain what I do, because it's better and it's marketable and it's this and it's that. And I'm just like, yes, but why? It just adds more complexity. So one of the kind of comments I got from my course around task taming was, oh, this just sounds like this and this and this. And I'm like, yes. It's just another way of saying the same thing. What I'm teaching you is not rocket science. Which is why it's good for everyone.
That's the hard pill to swallow that a lot of people don't like. The success, the way you get success, the process to success is the same for every effing person. It's following a philosophy of practice that you hold, i.e., behaviors that you have and you follow, values, competencies, and expectations that you want to uphold within your philosophy. And then you execute, you do the thing, you practice. And there's nothing else to add to that. And when I look at a lot of people that are doing it, they're already doing it. They're in the practice. They're doing the thing. Yes, some of them are making mistakes. Yes, some of them are making errors, but they're learning from it. Right? Thomas Frank posted a video recently on his main channel. He was like, oh yeah, I'm going to take a month out to do this other thing. A year and a half later, he's made a business, he's built a company, he's built a product, he's doing loads of other bits and bobs. But he just started doing the thing.
Yeah.
And like, he is a perfect example of learning. He does it. Most creators are the same. And I'm not saying most creators as in successful creators, but most creators are the same. They are interested in learning because they're engaged in learning. They do the practice. They follow philosophy. Do they know all this other jargon stuff? No. So don't need the complexity. No. Does the complexity help with the development of learning, it can do. But in constrained environments, with an educator to help navigate that space.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to be sat there going, I don't know, for hours, which ain't fun. Most people know it ain't fun. That's why people don't learn things that are complicated without either tutorials or help.
Yeah.
So diverting ourselves back towards the research and curiosity. I'm curious to get your thoughts now on when you're going to do research and when you're not going to do research, when you decide to stop research.
When I'm going to stop doing research. I mean, at the moment, the big question is when I'm going to start.
Yeah. I guess a better question then. Where is your research interest?
I have multiple, because of course I do. A lot of it right now is D&D focused, because that's something that I'm needing. Is some escapism from all of that.
Yeah, life.
So a lot of my research is in that creative sphere of like DMing, all of that stuff, and playing D&D. So it's kind of my big research project. When will that end? Well, it ends every week, but it also continues because I run sessions every week. And every week I'm doing something new. And every week I'm expanding that. So the deadline of a project is this day when I'm doing, for example, I've got one on Tuesday. That's an end date. And then I've got another one on Wednesday. That's an end date. I've got two on Thursday. So there's two end dates there. And then Tuesday week's another one. So I suppose when am I ending my research? In some ways, never.
Yep.
But in some ways, Tuesday and Thursday and Wednesday.
So what are you researching for D&D?
Better way. So improving my GM skills because I want to continue developing that. And I'm researching not necessarily better, but more efficient kind of techniques for developing longer campaigns. A lot of what I've done so far is very much off the cuff. And I like the off the cuff stuff, but it's minutely stressful. And so I want to reduce that as life is getting a bit nuts. So I want to have kind of a direction to go in and I want to improve the games that I'm running as I've got a couple of kind of set groups now. So I want to be able to create something that is very much like has a nice flow to it and allows me to take advantage of the of emergence inside of the game, but also have a better direction. So I'm not scrambling Tuesday morning to come up with. So that's kind of where my curiosity lies a lot. And I am still infinitely curious. Well, I just am infinitely curious.
I think most people are. It's whether they want to follow it.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. Because I was having a conversation in the past with someone recently around most people lose their curiosity, and I'm like, do they, or do they choose not to follow it? Like as you were just saying, like why do people stop being curious?
I don't think
Or stop following their curiosity. That's what I'm trying to say. I said because that's something that they said to me was, oh, you remain curious even though you're going through hell right now. You still remain open and curious, and you want to explore that curiosity. And I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I? And that's quite.
Yeah.
That to me is quite curious. That there is a perception that people stop. And I'm like,
but I think what they're looking at isn't curiosity, it's your actions and behavior. Because they don't recognize what it is that you're thinking. through your thought. They recognize what you're thinking through your actions and behavior, because they can't see what you're thinking. They can just see what you're doing, as it were, which I would argue they're one and the same thing, but embedded cognition, of course. So what they're seeing is your behaviors towards learning, following, questioning, those sorts of things. They're still seeing those. So your curiosity, I think everyone has curiosity, and it doesn't go. It's whether you follow, i.e. you act with relation to the curiosity that you have. And that is a behavior. And a behavior can be trained, conditioned, practiced, which means you have developed a skill of following curiosity, and you like to use that skill. Some people develop the skill, but don't have they're not as good with the skill. So they don't know how to do it as effectively, as well, in different environments. It's not as adaptable as other people. And that is where I think those skills of individuals in school struggle. Like they're constrained by the school environments because educational systems are challenging, and they haven't developed those skills off their own back for their own reasons, for whatever reason, whether that's school related, home related, friend related, or just their own interpretation of information that's being shared with them. They haven't developed those skills, so they struggle to use those skills later on in life. And that is what I would imagine people ask. It's like, how are you still curious? You're still curious, except I'm behaving in a way that follows curiosity. You're not. So how are you still practicing those skills? Is where I think the question would lead to.
It reminds me of when we first explored in that episode around my values around curiosity. You challenged me on that value, and it's interesting how it still remains true. I think there is more, and I think I'm slowly kind of digging. There is more there that I haven't quite got the expertise to explain yet. I know there's more, which is why I'm remaining curious about it. But it's not gone. One of the behaviors that I can sometimes is just following what other people do, because they suggest something. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. I will do that now. But one thing I haven't done is removed curiosity from my values, which if I was to follow that, I would have just gone, okay, yeah, that's wrong. Danny says it's wrong, so it's wrong. But it's not wrong, because that's where I'm at, which is why it's an ever-evolving...
I don't like the word wrong, but I know what you mean.
But that's the reaction I originally had. That's not what I believe. It's not wrong. It was just different.
Yeah.
Underdeveloped. That's probably a better phrase.
I like that. Yeah. Because for me, like, adding curiosity as a value for me is wrong, because I see other things inside of there. So when I think of curiosity, I think of honesty, and I think of consistency in behavior. And then, of course, with honesty and consistency, you then have to hold up some sort of integrity with what behaviors you're doing, whether you're following behaviors or not. And actually,
one of the kind of words that when I broke down curiosity, there was a lot of other words as well. There's the compassion, there's the interest, there's the openness, there's the appreciation, all of those kind of self-orientation, which is the word I took from you, and then drive. So I've been playing with the idea, because that the action that curiosity gives me, I am driven. I will do shit, which everyone around me like, how do you keep this? I think you experienced it. How do you keep doing all these things? How are you, like, you couldn't leave your home 3 years ago and all of a sudden you're traveling around the world? What the hell? How? I'm like, because I didn't have a choice. Like, I didn't have a choice as far as I was concerned. Of course I did.
Yeah.
But I was like, this is what I wanted, so I'm going to go and do it.
Yep. That to me is where you are being integral with your philosophy of
And
practice.
integrity is exactly one of my points. Integrity, commitment, and curiosity. I may add a fourth one of drive. I'm just trying to. I'm like playing with like whether I'm going to replace curiosity, but it doesn't feel right to replace it. But I am going to put drive on there because drive. Yeah, I like that. Put that on there. It seems to be part of curiosity, but
Mhm.
curiosity seems to be still.
Are they in your lexicon?
I think so. Yes, curiosity is, but drive is not. So let's put that in there.
Yeah, I've been developing my lexicon. I must admit, when I look at my values, there are loads of other words that I could put in there.
Yeah.
And when I question why I don't put them in there, the answer I typically come to is it's encompassed within my meaning of a word that's already in my value. So
Yeah.
when I hear curiosity, um, I personally see curiosity as part of consistency. So
Mm,
because my consistency in behavior
mm.
is curiosity. Like I don't think you can be curious and inconsistent. That's just me. I don't think you can be a curious
No,
person.
yeah, that tracks for me too.
Yeah. So that, but obviously, I then hold consistency in higher regard than curiosity. However, you obviously do it the other way around. Well,
Mm.
there's no right or wrong there. It's just different interpretations of words and meanings. And at the end of the day, as long as we understand our philosophy and how it maps to our practice design, it doesn't really make much of a difference where
And
you
it
put
and it's
it.
quite interesting as I've gained more understanding or expertise and expertise, sorry, in my own pop. It's like, oh, cool, yeah, that's how we. Because often it's quite easy to think that you and I share a lot of things, a lot of ideals, because we do. But there are also key differences between the two of us, which aren't easily exposed. Well, for me, it wasn't easily exposed until I looked at this, and it's like, cool, that's interesting. We see these; they are well, tangential, I suppose.
Hmm.
They're kind of along the same lines, but they're just slight differences, which make all the difference.
But that right there summarizes all of human existence.
It's cool.
Your relationship with the same environment as me is going to be different. What the differences in that relationship are going to be very nuanced.
Mm.
And that is what the philosophy of practice tries to draw out. The philosophy of practice is a representation of the relationship that we have with the environments that we work in, because the relationship we have within any working environment is our practice. And if we express our practice through language, well, there's going to be some slight differences in our meanings behind the language we use, which obviously represents the relationship differences that we have. Yes, we can still use the same overarching philosophy, whether that is we have a session, we do a warm up, maybe there's a cool down in there, but what that cooldown looks like, how long it is, what we decide to
Mm.
do with it, when the warm up is, when we decide to do it, is it encompassed in previous or past or post sessions, etc., etc. That's all going to be different. And using the theories of periodization. So my sister asked me yesterday, it's like, she's gone back to uni. She's still doing the editing for my second channel, the educational science channel, but she's also got a job and she's a student doing stuff at uni. So she brought on a lot of load, to use an S&C term, strength conditioning term. She has a lot more load, and she asked me, how do you manage your day? So I'm so tired, X, Y, Z, etc., etc. And I said, well, think of it like training. She's like, okay, like if you train in the morning, then you take a break, and then you train for 4 or 5 hours in the middle of the day without taking a break, and then you don't have dinner, and then do another training session. Physically, if you were to do that in football, would you manage? You're going, nah. So why are you trying to do that when you're doing work and when you're doing schoolwork? Well, they're not the same. Yes, they are. You are behaving, you are acting, you are expending energy. Doing something is expending energy. Oh, okay. So I said to her, so periodize your day. Well, how do I do that? Well, what does your body need to work? Fuel. Okay. where are you consuming fuel? Where are you having lunch, breakfast, dinner? Oh, my lunch is kind of like all over the place. So how does your body fuel itself? Well, I kind of forget to have lunch. So how do you stop yourself forgetting to have lunch? I guess I should put it in my calendar. And she didn't have that problem when she was at home, when she had lunch in her calendar. And then, oh, but I get really tired later on in the day. Okay, so
Don't do it then.
exactly. So how much load are you putting on yourself? Oh, well, it's not that much compared to you. We're not talking compared to me, we're talking compared to you. How much load can your body manage? How much are you trained to do right now? Oh, well, I guess not that much. I'm like, okay, let's try and work it out. So while she was here, she did late nights in Asda. So like waking up at like 1 a.m. to go to work at 2 a.m. to finish work at like 9 and then go to bed throughout the day. Like that's a completely different type of load to going to bed at 12 o'clock, waking up at 9, and then having a full day's work. It's a different type of load. So the training is different. The exercises are different, essentially. So you need to train, you need to change your practice to build up resistance to fatigue in this type of work. Oh, that makes sense. But that's the practice design. That's periodizing your life through energy and fatigue rather than through frameworks and wishy-washy words. I'm curious how... Oh, yeah, go.
This is something that I'm realizing because at the moment, as I've alluded to, life's been nuts. So my physical load may be low, but my mental load is exceptionally. I'm probably overtraining, maybe overreaching. It's all one, isn't it? It's not. There's no such thing as separation. There's no separation. It's just load. Shut up.
You got that just by the look.
I did, yeah. I was as I was talking, I was like, no, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. That doesn't make sense. No, it's just load. Stop it. Yeah. So there is a lot that's going on right now. So my understanding, which is not very high, so please, I welcome critique, which I'll get anyway, which is good. I think I had been overtraining, so pushing too far. And so I was exhausted all the time. So now I've kind of like, okay, cool. Let's just I know how much D&D I can do because I tested. I'm not going to do any more than that. Cool. I'm not doing any more than that. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to start bringing in work. And I've tested that with work as well. Okay, cool. This is how much work I can do at the moment. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to pull back. And I'm slow. And then all this happened. All this stuff over here, the non-existent stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to have to reassess again. and that
Constantly assessing, but yeah.
Constantly assess and like, okay, cool. This is how I'm and it's really changed my relationship to it. Of like going from okay, I just got to keep going, push myself, and do more, and just try harder. To okay, cool. What's actually happening, and how am I going to respond? Okay, cool. I pushed myself too hard. I overtrained there. Okay, cool. So that means I need to do less or reduce that to recover so I can get back up again and go again. I'm not a sports person, but it all makes sense.
You have just explained periodization, which is a concept taught in universities to strength and conditioning coaches, and some of them struggle and they're master degree students, and you've just explained it better than like half my cohort could.
I will go and take this clip and
Like, I don't know S&C, but I know how to explain the concept of periodization through practice. So questions for you then. You said overtraining. What does that mean?
So overtraining to me is going beyond a point where I cannot return to my baseline, which I'm using jargon. So I'm trying to unpack the jargon. The baseline is kind of my, I suppose, resting place, but that's not quite right. I haven't quite got the words there. It's kind of the baseline of where I'm able to function, I suppose. When I can't return to that baseline or higher, is when I've overtrained and I go
Okay,
below. That's my understanding.
it's not wrong.
Cool.
So simplified.
I know. I know.
So what's the difference between overtraining and overreaching?
That I don't know. That
Okay.
I'm not sure at all. I didn't
Okay.
get that far in my research on that.
That's fine, that's fair.
Yeah.
So overreaching. So when you train,
Mhm.
you expend energy.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, you expend enough energy
Mhm.
so that you can improve
Mhm.
the next time, right?
Mhm.
So you expend energy and then you do what's called compensate. So you go back to baseline. In an ideal world, you super compensate.
Mhm.
So you have energy level, which is the baseline.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you train, you go down because you've expended energy. When you recover, it then goes back up.
Mhm.
Normal training, you hit back to baseline. Great. If you do that, you continually and you maintain your baseline, your energy level. When you overreach, you train a little bit harder, but when you compensate, you do what's called super compensation. So you go above baseline. And then the next session, if you were to do just a normal session, you go down and up, but now you're slightly above baseline. So you've increased your baseline energy. That's overreaching.
Okay.
So you train with a hard session. So you fatigued a little bit more than's comfortable. So you've overreached. And the recovery has super compensated. So you've got better.
Yeah. So you rest more than your I suppose than your body needs to, like just a little bit over. Would you say that?
You don't need to rest more. You rest the same, but the
Okay.
level of fatigue, because the level of fatigue is a little bit more,
Mm.
that little bit more fatigue represents itself in supercompensation, which means you get better. So it's still 1 day of rest, but because it
Mm.
was a little bit harder, you've got better, right? So going to the gym, if you're lifting 50 kilos,
Mhm.
you can constantly lift 50 kilos.
Mhm.
If you lift 51 kilos, well, you're going to have a very small super compensation. So now you can lift 51 kilos constantly. If you lift 52, you now lift 52 constantly, right?
So it's kind of like the baseline is almost moving up.
Mm-hmm.
As you overtrain, you return to a higher baseline.
Overreach.
Overreach, sorry, yeah. As
Yeah.
you overreach, cool. Yeah, that
So as
makes
you overreach, the baseline goes up. That's what
goes up.
training is. In an ideal world, you overreach, you functionally overreach, you do something that's hard to make your baseline better.
Yeah. But
Oh,
overtraining is when you go too far.
exactly.
Yeah. When you push yourself beyond something and you can't and it takes longer to recover, I would assume. The recovery is I suppose not excessive, but would it be
Well, yeah.
excessive? Yeah.
So non-functional overreaching,
Hmm.
what do you think that is?
I
So
I would
functional overreaching is when you supercompensate and your baseline goes up. What's non-functional overreaching?
when your baseline goes down, when you do all the things but your baseline goes down.
Basically, it either stays the same or goes slightly down, yeah, because it's not functionally overreaching.
Yeah.
Overtraining is when it goes down. So non-functional
Ah,
overreaching is like maintenance or just below, so it takes you a little bit longer to recover. Overtraining is when you go down.
yeah.
When you overtrain for a long period of time, what do you think that is?
Burnout.
Yep.
Yay, look at me, how clever.
And and that is the concept of periodization with energy.
Mm.
So when you look at all of the different sessions that you do, some sessions you'll want to overreach because you want to get better. But
Mm.
because your load is global, if you functionally overreach in 6 different sessions, that's a lot of load to recover from.
So hence the cool down. So the cool down is kind of almost like a mini rest as such.
Yeah, that's an acute version of recovery. Yeah, because fatigue obviously takes a long time to recover, and fatigue is a very complicated concept in itself. But yeah, so when you do a session, if you do 5 sessions in a day and you functionally overreach, that's a lot of load. So yes, individual sessions, you should be able to recover the next day. But if your body isn't used to doing 5 overreaching sessions in a day, your body will go, nope. So then if you try and do the same sort of session the next day, so say you've lifted 51 and the next day you're going to lift 51, but you had loads of other sessions through the day, that 51 relative to your energy in that day isn't functional. It's now overtraining. And that is where you look at a training program and go, okay, do we work on percentages and just increase percentages? Or do we work on RPE, rate of perceived exertion?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the specialized strength and conditioning programs will be rate of perceived exertion, because it's more beneficial for those that do a lot of training in professional sports, et cetera, et cetera. And that's more useful for us because we can go, I feel shit today. I'm not going to overreach. I'm not going to try and improve. I'm going to just maintain myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you do a big session, a big overreaching session takes longer to recover. So other sessions shouldn't really be overreaching. And for you, life is a big overreach.
Oh, yes.
So your maintenance session for D&D may actually be shorter than what it was before, because relative energy says, I ain't got enough energy to do this shit right now.
Yeah.
Which is why people struggle.
Yeah.
And it's the same with all the other diseases. All the other diseases that impact energy, chronic fatigue, perfect example. People use examples of how many spoons they have, how many stars they have. They use sort of like
the same thing. It's RPE just described in a...
Exactly. It is rate of perceived exertion, periodization, supercompensation, and overtraining, just simplified into how many spoons do you have today?
Which in itself is probably, instead of having to think about all of this stuff, it's quite helpful because just how many spoons? I ain't got none. Okay, cool. Because this is something that my son's been going through as well. So it's like he's just been spending a lot of time not being in a social situation. And he is naturally doing that. I'm like, ooh. But I've noticed recently he's slowly started coming back down, slowly spending more time, because he is now... so cool.
We do it naturally.
Yeah.
Organisms do it naturally, because that is what our body is telling us. That is when you listen to your body and your body says, I don't want to be here right now. It's because you've expended too much energy to do it. And that's where when people say, oh, you're introverted because you're not in social environments. No, I'm introverted right now because right now my body is saying, no, you don't have the energy to manage that environment relationship. It doesn't mean I'm an introverted person. I can be an extroverted person, just not right now. I ain't got the energy to do that shit.
Yeah.
Why don't you have the energy to do that shit? Maybe you have behaviors where you expend energy elsewhere.
Yeah.
And when you look at typical behaviors from the so-called extroverted people, where do they expend their energy? In social environments. Where do the typically identified or categorized introverted people spend their energy? Exploring in their own time. They explore things, curiosity, they learn things, they expend energy in behaviors that are not in social environments, which means they don't have the energy to manage the relationship in social environments. Does it mean they're not social people? No. They can be, if they have the energy to do so. Which is where the nuance comes in with the label of introvert and extrovert.
And a good book for that is actually called Quiet. I really liked that book because it talks about this whole thing around introversion, extroversion, and how introverts... It's labeled as a secret power, marketing, blah, blah, blah. But it's a really decent explanation of this concept.
You know what I'll have to do?
What?
You know I'm writing a book.
Yeah.
I'll have to put all of the podcast episodes in the book.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, marketing, great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's basically what I'm doing anyway. I'm fostering the ideas for the book inside this
Yeah.
podcast. I mean, when I say I'm writing a book, I basically have a couple of files that say, "Hey, this is a good idea. This is a good idea. This is a good idea," and they got a title for a book and a subtitle. But yeah, right. That was much longer than I was expecting it to go. Yeah, we got the rugby later, so that'll be good fun.
Cool.
You have no idea what's going on, do you?
Nope.
England are in the Rugby World Cup semi-final.
Hang on. Woohoo.
The All Blacks are now in the final. They beat Argentina yesterday 44-6 in the semi-final. So, yeah, we're playing South Africa. It's going to be fun.
Hooray.
You're
And next
really
week-
not a sporty person.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Yeah, we're different in that aspect.
Dad, very.
Right. Everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.